So the specifics of the forecast is that we were going to have a disruption either due to war or to the sanctions that were going to force the Russians to basically export less. And as pressure builds up in the pipe back to the permafrost, that the wells themselves would freeze shut because the water that comes as a byproduct would freeze within the pipes and bust from the inside. The reason that hasn't happened is that original pulse that slowed the exports was not sufficient in size. The Russians were able to shut in wells in non-permafrost zones, specifically Tatarstan and Bashkiristan, and so they only shut in about 1 million barrels a day for about 6 to 8 weeks, and then were able to kick that back up again. I would argue that this is still going to happen. It's just going to take a little bit longer. The specific issue to watch for is on January 1, the sanctions regime on maritime insurance expands from any Russian flagged vessel to any vessel carrying any Russian cargo. That combined with the oil price cap that the Europeans are about to adopt is probably going to lock in at least 2 or 3 million barrels a day, and that's more than enough to cause that pump freeze. And once that happens, that stuff is offline for decades.
What about the natural gas fields in the Netherlands? Couldn't opening those fields up solve the German energy challenge?
According to the Dutch, if you take much more natural gas out of that, they're going to have flooding. And remember that the majority of the Netherlands is below sea level already, so that is a non-trivial concern. So they're very nervous for a number of reasons about playing that card. Now, the North Sea overall is a better play, and the Norwegians are doing everything they can to increase output as much as they can. But even if you open the Dutch fields all the way, you're probably only going to solve about 5 to 10% of the problem. People forget that oil and natural gas are the internationally traded fossil fuels. What we're seeing Europe doing is going en masse back to wood and coal. In fact, about 70% of the electricity that was generated in Germany this last month was coal and lignite. And we think of wood as a supplement, but it is as carbon intensive as lignite if you're burning it for either power or heat. And we are seeing the Europeans go to that at a pace that we have not seen since the dawn of the early industrial age when people were making charcoal en masse. The Germans have become so addicted to inexpensive, reliable natural gas supplies out of Europe or out of Russia that they base their entire economic system on it. So the natural gas doesn't just provide them with power. It's the base material for the entire petrochemical sector. And then that petrochem stuff is, for the most part, net exported. It's the base of their entire manufacturing model. The infrastructure's been destroyed, and some of the backup stuff all go through the conflict zone. So, it's not coming back at all. And even if they bring it in an LNG form, it'll be 6 times the cost of the old stuff. So what you're looking at is not just a collapse of their electricity sector and their petrochemical sector, but the entire German industrial model is going to be gone within 2 years. And that takes with it Belgium, the Netherlands, Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, and Bulgaria. Whenever the Germans get nervous about economics and energy, shit gets real in Europe really fast. I'm not saying they're going to march on Moscow, but for Germany to survive as a modern economy, it will have to have a radical political shift. That rarely goes well.
Do you think Iran is going to escalate the drone attacks on the Persian Gulf? And if so, how soon?
Well, I would start saying that the Ukraine war is proving that boots in the mud are still absolutely critical. It's just that there's more pieces in motion right now, of which drones are part of the landscape. So don't write off Iran's ability to actually throw people at a problem here. However, I would argue that if we do get to the point where the Iranians feel this is a good idea, keep in mind that with the United States largely not present in the Gulf anymore, the onus will not be on the United States to do something. The onus will be on the Saudis to do something. And since the Saudis have the capacity to export crude to west to the Red Sea instead of having to go through Hormuz, the country here that's likely to lose a lot of its oil export capacity is Iran. So if they start playing that game in the absence of the United States, I have no doubt that the Saudi Arabians have the military capacity necessary to utterly destroy all Iranian oil export capacity. The Iranian military is designed to occupy its own country. I mean, you guys remember the movie 300, The Thousand Nations of Persia? That's actually pretty accurate. Even today, after 4,000 years of cultural unification, Iran is only 50% Persian. And the way that you keep all these various mountain peoples from rebelling is you occupy your own country. That's why they have a 1 million-man army. We have not yet gotten to the point where I think that the mullahs feel a serious level of threat. And remember, this isn't China, where it's a one-man rule. And this isn't Russia, where it's a 100-man rule. This is a rule of a religious class that has over 10,000 members. The degree of resistance that would have to boil up to wipe this government away is extreme. So extreme that we've only seen it once in the last few centuries. And that was when the Shah fell, and the Shah didn't have a 10,000 deep bench. So I don't want to say this can't expand to that. It very well may. But right now, I do not see a lot of lights flashing yellow, much less red.
Do you think the U.S. will have technology leadership 5 and 10 years out?
The bottom line is the American educational system is broadly okay. And while we are facing a financial crunch from the retirement of the baby boomers, we have a replacement generation coming in. So the volume of the capital that is available to pursue technological leads still exists, even if it's going to be constrained and more expensive. The bigger problem in the United States is that the millennials are aging out. And, the millennials are now entering their mid-40s. And you need a lot of people in their 20s who are unattached, who can network together with a lot of capital. That's how you get broad-based technological advancement. And we're losing pressure on both of those factors. So I would expect the overall pace of technological advancement globally to slow considerably. And the technologies that we do pursue are going to be ones that are pretty close to being operationalized and prototyped already. We're just not going to have the capacity to go for the broad base anymore. And we're already seeing that in Silicon Valley with the liquidation of a lot of the staffs at most of these big tech companies. But compared to everyone else, we're still by far the tallest of the midgets, if you will. And the millennial class in the United States is larger than the millennial class in the rest of the free world combined. And even though the boomers are retiring, we have the least distorted demographic structure of all of the free world. And so we will still have more capital available. So a slower pace, fewer breakthroughs, less broad-based progress. Not all semiconductors are created equal. The semiconductor you put in your smart light bulb is not the same thing that is in your cell phone. Cell phones, satellites, large-scale power management systems, servers, computers, those are the high end. And we do that better than anyone else. By value, we produce more semiconductors than everyone else in the world put together. And the competitors in that space are Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan. So when you see the Biden administration with things like the CHIPS Act, encouraging fab facilities to pop up in the United States, we are competing with our partners. The mid-level chips, where the shortages have been because of COVID, that's aerospace, that's automotive. We don't make those, but neither do the Chinese. Those are made in Thailand and Malaysia. China makes the Internet of Things, your smart fridge, or your dryer chips, or your smart light bulbs. But China can only make them with equipment that is imported, with tools that are imported, with software is imported, with managers who are imported. One of the many things that the Biden administration has done in recent weeks is basically say you can't import the high-end chips, the mid-level chips, the equipment to make the low-level chips, or the tools or the software, and any American working in the sector has to choose between their job or their citizenship. And every American working in the sector was either transfer abroad or quit within 24 hours. So the Chinese tech story is already over. The American tech story is perhaps working on the wrong thing, because where we're building out the fabs is not where we have the shortages. What we really need is an expansion of English technical capacity in a place like Mexico in order to build more of the low to mid quality fabs. And that in the best case scenario is still several years away.